What horrible punishments did you think were normal until later? I imagine a lot of the old school punishments that we'll hear about in these stories were pretty traumatic or embarrassing, and so the victims naturally wouldn't really want to talk about it openly with their peers until they got much older and it became just a memory. But I'm thinking that with the dawn of the internet, where these stories can be shared openly with a wide audience, I would hope that it ultimately does some good in exposing how abnormal the punishments are and lead to fewer instances of them. Let's hear what the stories have to say. Story 1. My dad would punch and break things all the time. Yeah, we got belt spanked, but his anger outbursts caused me the most long-term damage. For instance, he might get mad at breakfast for something random, and then he'd just punch our TV and break it. One time he scratched his truck, so he got out and started beating up the mailbox and going crazy on it, while we just sat there and watched. Holes in the walls, temper tantrums, you name it, he did it. He would also get into fights at softball games and whatever else. As an adult, I have a really bad startle reaction to any sudden noise. I don't like violence of any kind. If I see people fighting, or even animals, it causes huge anxiety in my gut. I don't spank my kids, and never will, or resort to any sudden outburst. They're amazing children, and it's proof that kids can behave without spankings. Sometimes abuse is not obvious. To anyone reading, if you have an anger problem and take it out on things, get help. Even if you don't hurt your child directly, trust me, that violence is still sinking very deep into their psyche. Let's see, what else? My mom used to do this thing where she told my siblings she loved them, but would purposefully not say my name. This taught me from an early age that I was damaged and not worthy to be loved. It was also very normal for my dad to call us stupid, idiots, or completely stonewall us and respond to our questions with dead silence. This was the worst. Growing up, though, I just always assumed every household was like this. I have trouble even writing a lot of these things on here because I always fear there's an abusive parent reading this thread to get ideas to use on their kids. I think paranoia and sensitivity will be something I'll always carry. Story 2. My mom had a pretty short temper and was overall unreasonable. She verbally lashed out at us, mostly my dad, over the dumbest stuff. She talked crap about us behind our backs to each other. She'd, for example, ask me why I didn't do my laundry. I'd tell her that it slipped my mind, apologize, then tell her that I'd start it right away. She would then get ticked off and demand that I had remembered to do it in the first place. You can't make things right for my mom. You just let her put you down until she's satisfied. The whole, if you tell the truth, I won't be upset thing parents tell us is complete garbage. When I was 15, my grandparents, her parents, were struggling medically. We were the only family they had in town, so we had to take care of them. Grandpa's going senile around this time and would often respond negatively to our help. He hated doctors and wouldn't take his medicine. He was more than we could handle. We recommended an institution that could take care of them. Grandpa opposed the idea every time we brought it up. Eventually, my mom got sick of it and pretty much disconnected us from them. We didn't visit them on Mother's Day or Father's Day or any other holiday for that matter. When I wanted to visit them, I had to ask my dad for permission while keeping it a secret from Mom. We moved about a year later, and my mom didn't let us share our new address with anyone else but close friends because she didn't want her parents to know where they went. They're still in and out of the hospital, but I don't really know how they are. Story 3. Not my parents, but this guy my mom dated before remarrying. He would put down uncooked rice on the floor next to a wall and make me kneel on the rice while having my hands on the wall, as if holding up the wall. I still get chills just touching uncooked rice. I'm 25. This happened in the late 90s when I was around 5. This has to be some kind of old school form of punishment, no? When my dad was in grade school, teachers were allowed to give the strap to students for punishment. And when my dad got the strap at school, his old man would strap him again for getting in trouble at school. So when my dad was raising me back in the day, it was not unusual at all for parents to spank their kids. I was lucky. He only ever used his hands on my butt. He didn't hold back, though. My butt was tanned plenty. He was a big dude, and an angry dude a fair amount of the time. Today we call that abuse. I honestly don't want to debate anyone on whether it was or wasn't because I'm not really sure. I lived it and I know the studies that have been done, and they aren't wrong. I just don't hate my dad for it. He was only doing what he was taught, and what many other parents did as well, back a few decades ago. And if it had been called abuse and had there been awareness about it back when I was a kid, I don't think my dad would have done it. There's no prescription for how to raise a kid. There's a million different guidelines, but ultimately, everyone is going to parent differently. The closest thing there is to a prescription, though, is just your own gut feeling and moral compass on things. And if this guy's dad was under the impression that spanking was just the totally normal, conventional way of disciplining your kid, I guess I wouldn't really classify that as having malicious intent. Of course, you can only follow the norm to a certain extent, and it's ultimately good to question the status quo and seek out an objective truth, if it exists. As time went on, it seems that more studies were done to show that spanking is detrimental as it increases aggression in young children and is ineffective in changing their undesirable behavior. So I'm glad to see that society overall is moving in the right direction on this one. Story 4. Destroying my things, making me cook for myself from the age of 5 and up. I didn't realize this was unusual until my therapist, just last week, told me. Withholding food, withholding water, slamming my head into walls, manipulating me into doing things I didn't want to do, laughing at me if I got hurt, and telling me to toughen up and stop with the crocodile tears. To this day, the phrase crocodile tears gives me flashbacks, stopping me from sleeping for days on end, locking me in cupboards for days on end, prohibiting me from showering, ripping my hair out, cutting my hair violently with blunt scissors, isolating me to the point where I don't know basic things most people my age know, beating me and cutting my twin sister if I messed up or became annoying, etc., etc., etc. I never thought twice about it. Anytime I tried to tell another adult, they would tell me to respect my elders, or to stop misbehaving, or assuming I was acting like a teenage brat, even at 7, and deserved everything I got and more. Nobody reached out to comfort me. Nobody tried to protect me. Nobody did anything. Rarely in my life have I ever experienced human kindness, and yet I'm not a sociopath. I hate to see other people in pain, and I'll always extend a hand if it won't put me in a detriment. I will be okay, even if I'm a bit traumatized and mistrusting. I'm a functional and reasonably successful young adult with a future ahead of me, and I made it all on my own. Story 5. You can't call out her BS. She liked incriminating others, saying we were selfish for not letting me have feelings. Put yourself in my shoes, she'd say. Because of this, my dad was always on her side, defending her. She targeted most of her rage at him anyways. Kids aren't playing outside, it's his fault for being at work, rather than taking them fishing or something. Break another laptop or phone must mean he's being stingy and buying his wife garbage because his stuff never breaks. Straight up just not happy? Find something he's doing wrong and create an argument about it. Growing up, I thought lashing out at others for stupidity and being inconvenient was just a normal thing that people did. She was a terrible example that way, and it really hurt my sister. She's constantly struggling to control her explosive emotions and frequently is depressed. Mom and Dad berated her for her emotional instability, and she felt like she couldn't do anything right. She's currently fighting to become a more independent and confident adult. Personally, I noticed the way her bad example affected me early on, but it's still really hard to be a better person. Everybody rants, I noticed, but when I rant, people around me get super uncomfortable. I always catch myself too late. It was really difficult to decide how I felt about my mom because she was also genuinely loving and really cared about us. She just put herself first. I loved her, yet I hated her for the way she treated my dad. He deserved better. Story 6. My ex-stepdad was weird. If I left a cup of soda out, he would pour the whole bottle down the sink. He would take away Christmas or birthday gifts if we were bad, whatever that meant. My things got taken away a lot. Feelings were frowned upon. He was super protective of my mom during a time when I needed her the most. I was 10 and my parents had just gotten divorced and we moved a few 100 miles away. I remember maybe a month after we moved, I had a massive ear infection. I was crying because it hurt so bad, and instead of comforting me, he was just holding my mom, telling her how great she was. Like me and my siblings, any bad feeling we had just ruined her life or something. What made it hard was a lot of the things I was getting punished for were because I had severe, undiagnosed at the time, anxiety. Happy ending though, she dropped his butt when I was 15, and she and I have an amazing relationship. Story 7. I would get in trouble for simply expressing an opinion if it was counter to what my parents thought. My dad's punishment of choice was the belt on the bare bottom. I'm female, and this went on well into my teens. He'd make me take off my pants and bend over the bed. It was as humiliating as it was painful. He was also the king of gaslighting, and would sometimes ignore me for weeks if I'd slighted him in some way. There were times he acted like I didn't exist, and I'd have no idea what I'd done to upset him. It made me very insecure because I never knew what would upset him. Or sometimes something that I'd said that made him laugh one time would anger him the next time I said it. So I'd say or do things that had amused him before in a desperate attempt at gaining his approval, only to set him off and end up getting beaten or ignored. Story 8. When my sister and I were younger, about 4 and 7, she would pee her pants and I had trouble sleeping. My parents' solution to this was to make my sister wear her peed underwear like a hat on her head and only address her as gross peahead. They also decided that the way to cure my sleeping problems was for my stepdad to drag me out of bed at 4:30, 5 a.m. He'd make me march up and down the street with no shoes, chanting, "I will let my parents sleep at night. I will not wake people up." We'd do this for about an hour or so until I started to cry. He called them army days. I didn't realize how insanely abusive these things were until I was telling stories to a boyfriend of mine a couple years ago, and he got upset about my abusive childhood. It honestly seemed normal to me. Yeah, I get that parenting is probably one of the hardest things to do in life. And again, there's no prescriptive guidance that works for every single kid, so a lot of it is trial and error. But still, right off the bat, it seems pretty obvious that shaming your kid by making them wear their soiled underpants on their head as if they're a dog that you're rubbing their nose in their accident, that surely can't be the way to go. And marching them through the streets on display like they're Cersei Lannister is also a bit extreme. Story 9. My dad would jizz on me and my siblings. A lot. Here's the actual story. My dad is Iranian, so there's a little language barrier, even to this day. He found that if he wrapped his hand around our wrists and pinched just the tiniest amount of wrist skin, it would cause us enough non-harmful pain to where we would give in to whatever he wanted us to do. And I think that he thought on some microscopic level, the noise this pinching would make was jizz. So there were times that my siblings and I would be dashing through the house in terror, and my dad would be chasing us, brandishing his hand, yelling, "I'm gonna jizz on you." And that's 100% true. Story 10. I was completely in charge of my younger brothers. I had to change diapers, give them baths, feed them, get them dressed. Everything was my job. When I was in high school, I was responsible for watching them over summer break, and if I wanted to hang out with friends, I had to take them with me. My mom bragged about it to her friends, said it was the best form of birth control, so I wouldn't want to risk doing it as a teen and getting pregnant. Thing is, she essentially made me a teen mom and tried to prevent me from becoming a teen mom. I had to make all the sacrifices a teen mom has to make without even getting pregnant. Story 11. In 7th grade, we were talking about how our fathers would smack us, etc., when we were bad. There was this kid who once told us about how his father would poke his and his little sister's butthole if they were bad, meaning if they did something naughty, his father would stick his finger up inside the kid's butthole. At the time, we thought it was so gross, but not abusive, too young. Years later, I'm in high school with him. He's a little withdrawn, but he always was, to be honest. Never brought it up, but I always remembered. Sorry, there's no justice to this story like you may have wanted, at least to my knowledge. Story 12. I have no idea why, but my mother had a thing about us drinking water at times. I would be outside playing and come in saying I was thirsty, and my mother would put her finger on my tongue to feel it and say that I was fine. I guess because I still had saliva. She didn't always do it, just sometimes. This was in the 80s, and I've come to learn that she was always pilled out of her eyeballs on prescription drugs at the time, and also suffered lifelong depression. It's just something that I think about sometimes. It seems quite cruel, but at the time, I'd just go and drink out of the garden hose when she wasn't watching. Story 13. My mom hated me being fat, so she would make me just eat iceberg lettuce while everyone ate real dinner. I would cry so much, but she'd say it's my fault for getting fat. She also would only buy me clothes way too small for me, probably hoping I would be inspired to fit in them, which sucked because every time I told her I didn't have clothes for school, she would throw me down and beat me up savagely. She also made me go to stupid stuff from exercise classes to acupuncture alone to find a cure for my chubbiness. I hated going, and it made me hate myself even more. Story 14. When I was young, about 7 through 12, my dad would take apart my doorknob and lock it and put it on backwards so he could lock me in my own room. He would let me out only to let me go to school and to use the bathroom once a day. I'd also only get food once a day, in which they would open my door, toss me some food, then lock it right back up. I got used to him doing that, so I kind of thought it was normal. Looking back, I realize it was incredibly abusive. Story 15. Not my parents, but my aunt, who used to babysit us, always threatened to have us put in a mental institution. Anytime one of us kids acted up, she would go on a rant about calling the mental hospital and having us sent there and locked up. I mean, we weren't teenagers or anything. We were all 5 to 10 years old. It didn't take me long to realize she was most likely the one who should have been carted off to a mental institution. Story 16. My father never physically disciplined us, even though he would threaten to do so every once in a while. If he got really mad, he would go back to the bedroom and close the door. Then my mother had to deal with our problems. She never understood why he never took any initiative in correcting our behavior. After he passed, my father's sister told my mother that his father used to beat him all the time. Then it made sense. This is very sad, but at the same time, pretty commendable. OP's dad grew up knowing the pain of an abusive father, and it can be extremely difficult to break the chain of this punishment mentality if it's all that you've ever known. So for him to remove himself from the situation was probably very difficult for him to show restraint, and hopefully he broke the cycle by preventing his own kid from having to go through what he did. Story 17. It wasn't until I was a teen that I kind of realized not all parents acted like that. So then I just thought I had strict parents. It wasn't until I was an adult that I realized what I'd endured was actual abuse. Yet I still felt weird calling it that. The fact didn't really hit home for me until I had my own kids. Then it was like someone finally turned on the light. That's when the therapy started. Story 18. My dad's thing was using his belt and making me take my pants down so he could whip my bare butt. I never thought that much of it until my gym teacher pulled me aside one day and told me to skip class that day because I had cuts all down the back of my legs. It was the 70s, so nothing else happened. I guess for some reason he didn't want the other boys to see it. Story 19. I thought all of this was fairly normal. I once told my dad I was calling the cops on him, and he so confidently told me to go ahead because they'd take his side and I'd be the one in trouble. I believed him. I thought this was how all families must be, and that it was all my fault anyway. I was horrible for making him do these things. Story 20. Severe verbal abuse. I only just recently realized this, but my father has severe anger problems, and whenever he was ticked off at me, he would throw things, yell, and point out every one of my flaws, and tell me how I'd never amount to anything because of them. I started believing him, and now he's the reason I have no self-esteem. Story 21. Breaking my stuff. But one time, my mother grabbed an N64 game of mine and used a pot to bust it up. The game survived, the pot did not. She tossed the game in the dumpster, and I snuck it out. Please leave your stories in the comments. I'd love to make a video of them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.